Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning and good evening for participants who join online. So I'm Ramdan Anggakara Dibrata. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to have such interesting discussion in this panel in Jakarta, not only about how to make impact investing works, but how we can use the impact investing strategies to positive change and sustainable development in Asia. I'm so grateful to be here as a moderator for inspiring people in this panel. Let me introduce the panelists one by one. The first one is Pak Jamal Atamimi, Managing Partner of Links Asia. He is a Managing Partner and CEO of Links Asia Partner, a Singapore-based investment company that invests in multi-sector globally. Prior to co-founding Links, he was an investment banker and served as a managing director in Nomura Securities, Dutch Bank, Citibank in Singapore. I will hold my questions to you about how you successfully make a lot of investments, Pak Jamal. I will ask you later. Second, Lynette Ko. She's a director of Center Impact Investing and Practices, Temasek Trust. Prior to his positions, Lynette held concurrent appointment as a chief executive of two foundations under the Temasek family. Her responsibility include formulating, reviewing Singapore foreign economy policy at various multilaterals and bilateral fora, and developing regulations, the media sector in Singapore. The third one is Daniel Thomas Norman. He is a director of the KKR Global Impact. Based in Singapore, prior to KKR, Norman spent a decade with the TPG London, where he focused on the firm's financial services and fintech investing in Africa, and held various investing roles across their social impact, growth equity, and buyout funds. So, to start the discussions, since we promote the women in Amartha, right? Yeah, so I will let Lynette to be the one, yeah, to answer these questions. So I will give you time to share your perspective about the importance of using impact investing to tackle the social and environmental issues while also making the financial gains. Yeah. So would love to hear from you about your experience on this area. So yeah, the floor is yours, Lynette.
Thank you. I know it's after lunch, so all of us are feeling very good because it was such a good lunch spread just now. So I'm going to answer the question by perhaps showing a few slides so that you can have something to look at while I speak. If I can have the slides on, please.
Somebody can help us with the slide, please.
That's all right, I'll speak anyway, yeah. So the importance of impact, the importance of environment, social and governance issues, I think we all hear a lot about these terms. I have to maybe share a little bit about my personal journey first. I spent most of my time in different parts of the Singapore government service. At some point I had a midlife crisis, and somewhere in all that meandering, I ended up joining the Temasek family, first in the Temasek Foundation. And at that time, I heard a lot about sustainable investing because Temasek believes very strongly in investing for future generations. So the idea of investing in such a way that we leave the planet a better place is very important. So after a while in Temasek, I was asked if I could go to Temasek Trust and be part of the team that would set up the Center for Impact Investing and Practices. My first question was, what is impact investing? I think it's a term that's new to many of us. So maybe let me take a chance to say a little bit more about what that is. At that time, when I went around talking to companies, to investors, many of them said, oh, impact investing, go talk to my CSR department. It's about charity, isn't it? If you want to do good, surely that's about charity. And surely that's not the case. And here I just want to say a little bit about how the work of the center is about sharing how doing things sustainably, doing things with an ESG focus is actually something that makes good business sense. So we spend a lot of time talking about the spectrum of investments, starting from grant giving to venture philanthropy maybe, to catalytic investing, impact investing, commercial investing. And along that whole spectrum, there is a possibility of doing good while making financially viable returns. And that's what, if I may use it as a chance to talk about the center, that's what our Center for Impact Investing and Practices does. I think many people, less so now, have the impression that impact investing equals charitable work. But there is so much more that we need to talk about, to say doing things that are good for the environment, good for the planet, good for people, does not mean having concessionary returns. It can equally be a commercially viable endeavor. So as a center, what we do is we do a lot of research that can make the point using data. There you go, I see some slides. But I see them, not anybody else. So we do a lot of research in a way that we can share with a wider public what is impact investing. And we go into greater detail on how to do it using the tools that are actually available to the community, but may just be not as well known to all of us. We had the opportunity to do our first piece of research with the UNDP. You can see the slide here. We were very pleased to partner with the UNDP as their anchor partner in Asia. That meant that we were able to do what UNDP calls investor maps. So UNDP had been doing it on a global basis in many countries around the world. But unfortunately, Southeast Asia was not high enough on their radar to do any for Southeast Asia yet. So with our partnership, they were able to prioritize Southeast Asia a little bit more. And we were very pleased that Indonesia was the first country that we launched an investor map with back in 2022. That means that on a per country basis, UNDP talks to the government, to the business community, to the people sector, to understand what are the priorities for that country, and identifies what are the gaps towards SDGs. So that gives you additional information on what are the investable areas that you can go into that would not only be commercially viable, but also close the SDG gaps. Further to that work, we then understood, as we are all here to talk about today, the importance of financial inclusion. And that was the first piece of very deep research that we did, thanks to Amartha's partnership as well, to understand not only who are the players in this space, whether or not it's commercially viable, but more importantly, to understand what is the impact on the customer. There are over 300 million people who are unbanked and underbanked in Southeast Asia. Sometimes we get the odd article in the press that says that actually to get these people banked, may not lead to good outcomes. It may lead to negative outcomes. It may lead to situations where the person becomes over-indebted, takes on a loan that you cannot afford to pay, the house gets repossessed. Sometimes we hear such stories and we wondered if those were the exceptions or the norm. That's what we sought to study, to see under what circumstances can you get to good outcomes for the customers. And here you can see some of the case studies that we did, Amartha being one of them, on some of the good examples in Southeast Asia of financial service providers who have made it a point to reach the customers in a meaningful way. So these are examples of the research that we do to raise the profile of impact to both investors and to companies, to show some tools on how to measure and manage your impact in a way to get to good outcomes. We also do a lot of work in terms of capacity building and programs, which I can talk about if suitable later on. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynette. So I will go to Pak Jamal for these questions. As an entrepreneur, right? How do you see the impact investment, right? I'll share. Yeah, the floor is yours, Pak Jamal.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, maybe just a little bit of background. Our company is an investor who are sector agnostic, right? So we're sector agnostic, we're geographical agnostic, and we invest in different stages of growth. So we're very happy to have come across Amartha back in 2017, actually, when there were only 50 people in the team, and they were probably operating, if I'm not mistaken, in 5 kabupaten. And fast forward now, Amartha is nationwide and also have thousands of people in their platform. But, you know, our experience in impact investing actually is not so much different than anything else that one would be investing in, right? First of all, you know, as you can see in the definition, it's basically how do you bring money, how do you invest into something that is good for the society, right? In our portfolio now, Amartha would be one where financial inclusion and women empowerment is part of the themes. And we also have a portfolio of renewable energy and waste management, right? Those are things that are high in the agenda of the world, you know, for a better future in the next generation. Just if we were to move forward, how do you achieve targeted impact, right? Obviously, most of money in the world are not free. There are different sources. Government programs would be one, but private capital would be another. The problems that we would want to solve typically are large problems which require major capital and major commitments and time commitments from a lot of parties that are involved. So to give an example, you know, when you make changes, in any case, you know, you have to solve problems that exist for a lot of people in society, right? So I have a couple of examples here. You know, if you're familiar with Indonesia, as you go around, especially in the second and third cities, you see people selling stuff on rickshaw or on motorcycles, with plastic containers or buckets and all that. So one typical situation is fish sellers in eastern of Indonesia where they put fish in buckets, you know, and the bucket is probably X or was a painting bucket, and then, you know, they just put water in it, right? So you run a very high risk of spoiled material there. So the new invention, technology invention that was done was somebody created an insulated rice bucket and gel packs. Just those two simple items basically help manage temperature and, you know, improve the lifetime and quality of the fish, right? It may sound normal for us, but, you know, it has a lot of implications for people who are only able to consume on a daily basis through such a manner, right? The next one that I have is obviously closer to us, is Amartha, right? We know of one of their clients, a 40-year-old family, you know, the lady and the husband are in the business of producing clean drinking water. So this is in a remote village in North Sumatra. It turns out that there are many locations where there aren't enough drinking water. This lady happened to be lucky. She has a good drinking source. And, you know, the problem was that at one point, the production facility or the factory, don't think about a large factory, yeah? This is like home businesses. It was on fire. So from initially serving 2 to 3 customers a day, they got introduced to Amartha, rebuilt the facility, and now is able to supply 15 customers on a daily basis. So, you know, in business, that's a quintuple increase in the volume of the business, right? So, having said that, what's important for us as investor? One, you know, actually we look at an index, and this just so happens, I looked it up last night. Amartha has this prosperity index. Through the survey that they've done, they check what's important for people at grassroots level, right? And, you know, it's interesting that all the things that were discussed in this event is part of the criteria that are important. But the most important thing, the highest priority, is actually access to capital, loans, and internet access. So hopefully with Elon Musk in Indonesia, Starlink can be cheaper and be more accessible to the rest of the country. So that's how you define, that's how we define the target. And then when you start investing, what's important? To us, it's just like any other business. The management of the company is important. It's actually on the next slide, right? The leadership is important. The execution team is important, right? And, you know, I'm not selling Amartha because I'm already in it. But since 2017, we've seen significant growth. And that is not because of a few people. There are hundreds of people who are participating in this process within the company. But, you know, obviously management has a very strong control, measurements and yardsticks for them to have the team implement it on the field, right? Because, you know, like maybe some of you will go with Amartha tomorrow to the field, and you will be able to see, you know, that even though it's all simple models, but when it comes to execution, it's actually very, very important to have a strong team on the ground. So I think that's it for me. I'm too long, actually.
Thank you, Pak Jamal. So I'll go to Daniel. KKR has been one of the largest private largest private equity company in the world over 50 years, right? So we would love to hear about the successful example, right, and best practices in impact investing. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for that. And can I just say thank you very much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here in Jakarta, and it's a lovely event you've put on at a lovely hotel, so thank you. And thanks for inviting me as a guest. So I think, look, KKR has a lot to learn about impact investing. We're relatively new to the game. We only got into this in 2018 alongside some of our peers. KKR, for those of you who don't know, they're a broader alternative investments platform. They manage about $550 billion, about $500 billion, mostly in Europe and North America and Asia. And the reason we got into impact investing is because the limited partners, the pension funds of Canada, the pension funds of North America, wanted us to be in impact investing. There was demand from our backers to say, why aren't you doing this? And if you think about the arc of impact investing, we're very much mainstream today. It's a good news story because 15 or 20 years ago, it was the remit of the World Bank, a few development agencies, and you now have funds like Apollo, like KKR, like TPG, which are moving in en masse at much bigger scale and with the toolkits that private equity brings. So the opportunity is amazing. We have to learn, right? KKR has to learn from the multilaterals, from the development agencies, how to do impact. But we can also bring something as well. I think one of that is the toolkit, the operational best practices from large-scale organizations. The second thing that we can bring is ways to navigate the capital markets, and we should talk about exit and getting out of investments. But we have a lot of experience, in the capital markets, which can be valuable. And then the third point that I'd like to raise, which I think we should discuss, is measurement, impact measurement, because I think we all agree on this table what is impact in terms of the definition. I think there'd be very limited daylight. The problem that CalPERS and CalSTRS and OTPP and North Americans have when we speak to them is, how do I measure impact equally across these various funds? It's very, every fund has their own little style. The IFC has their principles, the ADB has their principles, KKR has their way. How can we standardize that so that some sovereign wealth fund in Abu Dhabi or some pension fund in North America can actually go at a grassroots level, look at Amartha and say, okay, it's very, very clear, these are the KPIs, this is how they've tracked, I can sign off that impact has been delivered. Because the financial returns, they're kind of taking care of themselves. I think the region is performing, the growth is here in Asia, private capital is attracting in, we don't need to worry as much about that. But the impact measurement is very important. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you. Back to Pak Jamal, right? The trends of incorporating ESG in investment is raising year on year, right? As my experience, every time the investors want to know about the companies, they will asking you about do you have ESG policies, do you have the action plans about the ESGs and everything. How do you think the company should prepare for this? Yeah.
Okay, so that's very interesting because one of our investee company, like I mentioned earlier, is in renewables, right? But there are a couple of triggers that necessitate the change. One is the requirement from the world as a whole. We all have families. We want better future for our children. We want cleaner air. We want a cleaner ecosystem, etc., etc. And at the same time, just like what Daniel has mentioned, their backers pay attention to where they're investing their money, the types of businesses that they do, right? So there are two opposites, right? One is that you need to you want to be a good citizen of the world, but the second is that there are actually requirements from stakeholders, right? And that stakeholders vary from institution to institution. In our case, I can tell you that if you were doing energy using coal, it's more and more difficult to get financing, period, right? So you've got no choice but to figure out something else. Now, I think, there are a lot of issues in terms of implementation. Sometimes we're a bit aggressive when it comes to timeline, but I think eventually we're going to go in that direction, right? Everybody is going to go in that direction. So it's a necessity that people will have to comply with, right? The same with financial inclusion, right? You cannot leave behind the larger part of society who actually sustain a big chunk of the economic growth, right? Some of the larger institutions are less flexible, they're heavily regulated, and therefore have much less agility in dealing with such circumstances, as well as picking up actually opportunities on the other side, right? So, the growth and the birth and the growth of fintech, which is basically the same business model as banking, but facilitated heavily by technology, is a solution to that problem, right? So that's where we are now.
Okay, so Lynette, yeah, you have experience for more than 20 years in government-related entities, right? Yeah, so I want to ask with you about what the policies, interventions, and regulatory frameworks that are needed to create an enabling environment for impact investment. Yeah.
That's a huge question. I'll have to break it down a little bit because impact investing means different things to different people. I know we're all trying to get to similar definitions. What we've done at the center is to go quite deep. And I'll talk about financial inclusion since this is the audience that we're all interested in financial inclusion matters. Actually, it boils down to the same thing, data. When we talk to investors, they lament that there's not enough data to compare across companies. When we talk to companies, they say, I can collect data, but what data should I collect? Because everybody's asking for different types of data. I can't collect everything. And it's the same thing with policy. Policy decisions, in my limited experience in just one country, is usually backed by data as well. And so in the area of financial inclusion, what we have done as a center is we've invested a lot of effort to engage with companies who will actually interview customers. Because at the end of the day, we all want to know, are we making a difference to the people we wanted to make a difference to? When I give somebody a bank loan, is his or her life better? And what does better mean? In most cases, when we see the publicly available data, it means, I had, X number of customers, a certain percentage are women, a certain percentage are first-time loan takers. But that's actually an output data. What we want is outcomes. So when a person took the loan, has his life become better? What does it mean for his life to become better? If the person took a loan for consumption, Was there stress associated with repaying the loan? Did they have to cut back on household expenses in order to repay the loan? If the person took a loan for productive purposes, for example, bought inventory or hired someone, did it result in more business for that company? Did it result in that person being able to hire more people and create more jobs for the community? These are the kinds of outcome data that we want to collect, which is what we as a center set out to collect with the partnership of many financial service providers, including Amartha. With that kind of data, actually we go to many parties. We go to the investor to say, this is a commercially viable business, because we actually also got that data from the financial service providers. It's commercially viable and it got good impact on the customer. We go to the financial service provider and we say, this is the impact that your company, your institution got. Compare it with the rest of the community. You know where you stand. Are you better? Are you above or below average? What more can you do? And one of the things we found out was that if a financial service provider put in place an impact measurement and management framework, there was a higher chance that the customer got a better outcome. If this customer received a better outcome, of course, the loan repayment rate is going to be good. And Net Promoter Score was higher. It's all very intuitive. Net Promoter Score is higher, more business. So it makes commercial sense to put in place what we call the impact measurement and management framework. It might seem intuitive, but until you put the data to it, people might say, oh, well, that's anecdotal evidence. How do I know that that's representative? And it's the same thing for policy. You need to give data to the policymakers to say, it is worthwhile looking at this policy area, because if you do that, you will be able to get good outcomes for the community. And with the policy interventions, one has to get quite specific. So in the area of financial inclusion, we've nailed down to 2 or 3 very specific policy interventions, which we can go to the relevant parties with. So it's not across-the-board impact investing policy. It actually has to go quite deep, and that's what we set out to do that research in a way that benefits all parties, the investor, the companies, and hopefully the policymakers as well. Thank you.
Hold on. Yeah, you've done a lot of research, right? And the question is, how can impact investing strategies can better align with achieving the sustainable development goals in Asia?
So thank you for giving me the chance to say a little bit more. I think it first starts with identifying where are the gaps. So this is where the investor maps that we did with UNDP makes sense, because as individual actors in the community, it's very hard for us to do that kind of research individually. So the UNDP's system of identifying which are the biggest gaps towards the SDGs gives us a sense of which sector to go into. And this is all publicly available information. The Southeast Asian maps are available on our Center for Impact Investing and Practices, CIIP website. It's also available on the UNDP website, which is called the Investor Platform. The global maps are also available on the SDG platform. So first, identify which sector makes the biggest difference. Secondly, identify if there is a commercially viable business that you can do there. And again, this is where there are many examples, and we as a center also put out information on commercially viable businesses that we already see. And there's no shortcut to it. We don't want to give the impression that the only way to make impact is to start a new company, where you have a clean slate, you can start with your impact intention, you can think about how my strategy should be to address this specific customer segment. We've also gone to existing companies that have been around for a long time. Before the word impact investing was coined, Surely, we are not saying that those companies make no impact just because the terms did not come about until later. So we've also given examples of how companies were able to pivot. So I'll give you another example of Japfa, Indonesian company that you might all be familiar with. At least that's what we're told. Started with identifying malnutrition in Indonesia as an issue they wanted to address. This is in the 1960s, I believe, when the company was first founded. Decided to go into poultry farming with the goal of providing protein at an affordable price point. Surely that's making an impact, but hey, the company was around way before impact investing was coined. But we don't look at just the company, look at what are the management processes they've put in place. In this case, they have put in place, they conducted a life cycle analysis. They've identified not just where they made a good impact, but they also identified where actually there might have been negative impact. And you do something about it. And in poultry farming, water management, wastewater management is an issue. So they've put in place a very robust way of handling wastewater. And guess what? They get a sustainability-linked bond. They get a sustainability-linked loan for it. So it all makes financial sense again, right? So there are, one has to go into a fair amount of detail, but you start with the big picture. What is the sector? What is the customer segment? And then you think about your business strategy accordingly with impact measurement management practices in place. Thank you.
Daniel, so we know that the KKR, invests globally, right? And for the last 50 years, we know that the KKR is a non-impact investors. In the last few years, right, you release your impact funds, new impact funds, right? So the question is, what's the prompted KKR to consider the impact investment strategies, and how do you see the evolving within the firm investment approach?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. So I think, look, our strategy has been very much of leveraging the existing offer structure within KKR. So you can see us as kind of a sub-strategy or a small, fast speedboat to the broader kind of, oil tanker that is KKR. And we want to grow the funds, right? So I think as an industry, the last fund was kind of 2.8 billion. We'd love to kind of double that and go to 4 or go to 5 billion in the next fund. And we think that Asia is an incredibly important part of that strategy. So the fund is a little bit different in that it's commingled. So it has to compete with North American deals, European deals, and Asian deals. But we think the risk return in Asia actually stacks up quite well. The one barrier that we see, or that we think that would really unlock Southeast Asia as an investment destination is actually getting exits. So we need to return capital to our own investors. They're kind of fixed life funds. And so when you look at countries in the region like India, we should try as much as possible to learn the lessons from India and how they've unlocked exits for investors, capital markets, IPOs, et cetera, because if we could address that collectively, I think not just for impact investing, but the investment in all of the region could really pop. So we're trying to implement best practices and particularly trying to implement the playbook from India down here. So.
Yeah, thank you. So let's take one question from the audience. So, somebody can help? Oh, this is the questions. I don't have a screen in front of me. Beyond just funding, what what support do impact investors like Links Asia provide to portfolio companies to ensure they scale their solutions effectively? So, yeah, the question is to Pak Jamal, right? Okay, yeah, for Pak Jamal, what kind of support that you usually give to your company?
Okay, thank you. We are by nature a very active investor, regardless of the size of ownership that we have in the companies that or business that we're investing in. And what we do is, nothing happens by itself. Everything is done through connectivity. So what we do help with our investee companies is to connect, right? To connect with the right people, to connect with the right counterparts. In the case of Amartha, we work a lot with Pak Ramdan in terms of securing different sources of funding. At one stage of the growth, we were very actively participating and helping frame the risk management system, et cetera, right? We also help when it comes to having to form a team or a management team for the company as it grows, right? Like I said earlier, the founder, the leadership, and the management is very, very important, right? Because they need to translate their views of the business model and how to execute to the team. And having that team, solid team is very, very important. Not just in it's important in any business, right? At the end of the day, money doesn't solve all the problems, but having the right team is actually very, very critical, because if you have the right team, then capital will come. So we help through all angles as much as we can. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Jamal. Maybe one question from the audience. Maybe somebody can help us with a microphone. No. Just take one question.
Thank you so much. Very wonderful discussions. Alexander, actually I come from Digital Transformation Council from Ministry of Industry. So I think the question is that for Indonesia, it's a new trend to have this impact investment. I remember when the Ford Foundation came like 2 years ago, ADB and so on. Not as in Europe, I used to work for San Partignano. It's one of the biggest actually drug addict community, 1,000, I think one of the biggest in Europe. And I met Sir Cohen, which is, we all know is the founder or the father of ESG. Yeah. So the thing is that it's really difficult for us, for instance, now in the impact investment, to find founders who have that mindset. So here, everyone wants to become fast rich. Sometimes I even, wonder. I thought because we invest in womanpreneurship, and I expect that the women have a more social impact mindset. Well, sometimes it's just not true. Yeah. So they all wants to be fast rich. So my question will be then, how we can change this ecosystem? Because I'm actually coming from Accelerator from Switzerland, and when I come back to Indonesia, I tried to make what we call exchange between Switzerland startups and Indonesia and so on. But the question will be then, it's just pretty new here, yeah. So and now it's even more in impact investment, impact to the woman, impact to the poverty, impact to hygiene and so on. So it's even more difficult for the founders here to digest this kind of new things. Yeah. So, and in our team as a venture capitalist, to be honest, it's not easy to differentiate our team. My team wants all to become fast rich. So I need to set up another team that have this impact social mindset. Yeah. So this is not easy. So you can have a big, even big cost and so on and so forth. So I need advice from the speaker, very distinguished speaker here, how we can help these things out. Thank you.
Very good questions. Daniel?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm best placed to answer that, but it's a very insightful statement. And I think part of this is the growing pains that I was talking about earlier, and that we're still very early on. You know, we're still very early innings, and even in Europe, where I've spent most of my impact investing career up until now, they're still figuring it out. And one of the things I would say is that the various stakeholders need to talk more, because the landscape is changing very rapidly, and impact investing is no longer the domain of regulators or of development finance institutions. There's now venture capital funds which are coming in. There's private equity which is coming in. There's family offices, and so we do need to collaborate a little bit more. Just like we have accounting standards for annual reports, and there's very limited debate globally around what is net income, how to classify revenue. We need some of that standardization to come into the sector. Now, how you get that, I'll leave it to the policymakers who know this much more than me. But from an investment standpoint, that standardization would be really, really helpful. Yeah.
Right, okay, thank you. We still have a minute. Maybe one more questions before we run up the sessions today from audience. No? Okay, so before we run up the sessions, maybe one closing set statement, right, from each speakers. Yeah? From ladies.
Thank you. Well, since I'm also looking at something there in terms of long-term goal, long-term outcomes or short-term fixes, I'd like to say that to me, and of course there are many experts in the room, impact investing is definitely not short-term fixes. In fact, impact investing pushes the boundary to get to the long-term outcomes. It works harder to try to find the root cause of the problem. So in financial inclusion, it's not just about giving someone a loan. That might be a short-term fix. It's about making sure that that person will use that loan well. So it's about all the other things around it: financial literacy, digital literacy, even down to business issues that people want to learn more about. And I really echo Daniel's point about more dialogue and coming together. So bring it back to maybe one statement. I think more dialogues like this, more sharing of best practices like this is really, really important. And I want to thank Amartha for bringing us together, for showing leadership in a world that's so important. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Pak Jamal?
So there are two words in here. One is impact, the other one is investing. On the investing side, obviously everything is long-term. If you want to have if you want to get rich quickly, then, the casinos are probably the place. But when it comes to investing, especially for good cause, then, patience and communication is very, very important for success.
And then Daniel.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I mean, I think the one thing that we haven't mentioned, because we're all kind of in the financial services sector, is we should take a moment to actually appreciate the founders who go and build businesses, who actually go on risk and put their own personal capital on the line. It's very easy for the financial providers to come in and invest once things are de-risked and once businesses are scaled. But they are actually the real drivers of impact, right? The entrepreneur who is seeing a market need, a business model need, going into the market, raising capital and kind of building a business from scratch. They're the true heroes, right? And they're the real engine of growth in the region. I think we are in one of the most exciting places on the planet, truly. And that this is overall a massive good news story, but we should also just appreciate the businesses in the room, the CEOs, the CFOs who kind of turn the wheels day to day. They're often the unsung heroes and the ones with the sleepless nights. So,
yeah. Okay. Thank you for all the speakers. Was a great panel. Was very insightful discussions that we have today. As we heard from the panel today, the impact investing is currently part of the global impact strategy. The companies that focus on the ESG-related risks and the opportunities can create stronger and better investment outcome. Thank you. Thank you for all the speakers. Thank you for all the participants. Stay tuned for the next sessions. I'm Ramdan Angga Karadibrata. Thank you.